So imagine you are standing in a high school hallway.
Okay.
The bell has just rung, lockers are slamming, the chaotic energy of passing period is in full swing.
Right, that classic high school chaos.
Exactly. And a student walks up to one of his classmates holding just a simple white index card. He hands it over and asks a remarkably straightforward question.
Yeah.
He just says, "Can you read this single sentence out loud for the camera?"
And just to be clear, this isn't some kind of trick question, right?
Oh, not at all. It's not a trick. The sentence isn't pulled from Shakespeare. It isn't, complex legal jargon. And it's not a dense medical textbook. It is literally just the descriptive sentence. But as you watch this classmate look down at the card, you see them completely short circuit.
Yeah, they just freeze up.
They stare at words like silhouette and exemplified as if they are ancient hieroglyphics. I mean, they stumble, they make these wild phonetic guesses, and ultimately, they just hand the card back, completely defeated.
It is a genuinely startling visual to process.
Right.
When you see a teenager, someone who is, perhaps just a year or two away from voting.
Or entering the workforce.
Right. Or being legally expected to comprehend a binding contract. Seeing them completely unable to sound out a standard English vocabulary word, it forces a hard pause.
It really does.
It shatters the fundamental baseline assumption you have about what is actually happening inside the modern education.
And that exact deeply uncomfortable scenario is the jumping off point for the deep dive we are getting into today. We are unpacking a comprehensive, fiercely opinionated video essay and transcript from a creator named Sydney Watt.
And she really goes in on this topic.
Oh, absolutely. In this source material, she investigates what she frames as a massive, alarming literacy and basic skills crisis sweeping through Gen Z and the newest generation, Gen Alpha.
Yeah, and we're talking about data showing high schoolers who cannot read at a primary school level.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is. And college professors who are resorting to reading assignments out loud in lecture halls, plus just a broader systemic erosion of what you might call analog.
Right. So the mission for our analysis today is to systematically break down the mechanics of this conversation. We're going to examine those shocking viral videos that first sparked this discourse. But, we are going to look past just the anecdotal shock value.
We really have to look at the macro level data.
Exactly. We will explore the hard statistics and the frontline teacher testimonies the source provides to see if the data actually matches the viral outrate. And from there, we'll unpack the systemic, technological, and generational root causes that the creator blames for this crisis.
Because ultimately, the question we have to grapple with here is, what happens to a society and to a functioning democracy when its newest adults literally cannot read the room or a book?
Yeah, that's the big question. And I want to set the tone for you right away because the source material we are looking at today is incredibly alarming. It is occasionally hilarious in a very dark, bleak sort of way.
Very dark humor, yeah.
But our goal here isn't just to point and laugh at teenagers struggling to read. I mean, it doesn't help anyone.
No, and frankly, it misses the entire point of why this is happening.
Right. We want to truly understand the mechanics of this educational breakdown. So let's start with the catalyst. Let's talk about the teenage boy who turned a camera on his own school and started this entire viral trend. His name is Vic.
Vic essentially acted as a whistleblower within his own peer. He started handing out these index cards to his class, filming their attempts to read. And the source highlights two specific sentences that Vic used, which are just fascinating case studies in phonetic sound.
So what was his first one?
The first sentence was, "She wore a silhouette of clothes that were extraordinary but somewhat gauche."
Okay. Gauche is tough, I'll freely admit that.
Oh, for sure.
If you are a 16-year-old who doesn't read French literature or, high-fashion magazines, you might not encounter the word gauche in the wild.
That's a very fair point.
The source creator even concedes that she understands why a teenager might stumble on that specific word. But it wasn't just gauche that tripped them up, was it?
No, not at all. The struggle was foundational. The source details the phonetic butchering of the word silhouette.
How are they saying it?
Students were pronouncing it Sahalit or even Sylvia. Yeah, Sylvia. And when they encountered the word extraordinary, they simply couldn't parse the visual information on the card into spoken language. They were completely unequipped to decode the letters.
The second sentence the source points out is almost more revealing about the state of comprehension. The sentence was, "The dog's unwavering loyalty exemplified an unreciprocated emotional dependency."
And the breakdown there was catastrophic. According to the source, the word unwavering became unwearing. The word unreciprocated was mangled into unreaded.
Unreaded, wow.
Yeah, and when it came to exemplified, one student flat out stopped and asked, "Is that even a word?"
They didn't even recognize it as English.
Exactly. They were completely paralyzed. And the crucial detail the source points out here is that even if a student somehow managed to sound out a word by sheer luck, they had absolutely zero comprehension of what the sentence actually meant.
So the meaning was totally lost.
Completely. When asked to explain the concept of the sentence, they just drew a complete blank.
Okay, let me push back on this for a second, because I think a lot of people listening might have the exact same initial reaction I did. When I hear about a viral TikTok trend of kids failing to read, my immediate skeptical thought is blooper reel.
Sure, yeah.
You know how it is. Teenagers love to troll. They love to perform for the camera. Are we just seeing the worst 10 seconds of a school day, heavily edited by a high schooler looking for maximum clicks and engagement? I mean, could they just be playing dumb for the views?
And that is the exact critical lens you should apply when analyzing any social media trend. The medium thrives on extreme performative reaction. But if you look closely at the behavioral cues the source describes in these videos, the trolling theory really starts to fall apart. Well, when teenagers perform or troll, there is usually a subtle wink to the audience, right? Like a shared joke. In these clips, the overwhelming emotion is genuine frustration.
Oh, interesting.
You have students actively avoiding the task, saying things like, I don't know what this should say, I can't read it, take the card back. They are defensively handing the card away. There is a palpable, heavy sense of embarrassment.
They genuinely don't want to be doing it.
Right. But what really solidifies that this isn't just a prank is how the institution itself reacts.
Oh my gosh, this is the part that genuinely blew my mind. So Vic's videos explode online. They're racking up millions of views. The school is suddenly in the national spotlight. And how do the administrators respond? Do they, I don't know, announce an emergency literacy initiative?
You would hope so.
Do they pull these kids into tutoring? No. The source states that the school's immediate reaction was to threaten Vic with expulsion.
Which is just wild.
They threatened to ban him from prom and to ban him from walking at his graduation.
And that is a classic, deeply revealing, institutional self-preservation flex. The school didn't look at this and see an educational emergency. They saw a public relations crisis.
Yep, it was all about the optics.
Exactly. Their immediate instinct was to punish the whistleblower who exposed the failure, rather than address the actual failure itself.
The creator of the video essay actually dug into this and found the public relations statement the school eventually released. It is an absolute masterclass in bureaucratic deflection.
Oh, I'm sure it was.
The school claimed that the videos took the students out of context and led to a portrayal that was misleading and unfair.
I think we really have to pause on that phrase, out of context.
Right.
What context makes a high school student fundamentally incapable of sounding out the word silhouette?
There isn't one.
Exactly. Is there a context where thinking exemplified isn't a real word, is somehow acceptable for a student about to graduate? The statement subtly confirmed that disciplinary action was taken against Vic, though it did deny the extreme measures like expulsion.
But the damage was done.
Yeah, in trying to suppress the embarrassment, the school only validated Vic's underlying thesis. They proved they were way more concerned with the illusion of education than the reality of it. And to Vic's credit, the threats didn't even work. He went on to make 8 more.
Good for him, honestly. The school's reaction really bridges the gap for me between this being a quirky internet anomaly and a real systemic issue. Because if the school is that terrified of the footage, they know it's a true reflection of their classroom.
You know it's real.
But a few TikToks, even a dozen of them, still don't give you the macro-level picture. So the source pivots from these micro-level embarrassments to some incredibly sobering data that proves this isn't just one failing district in one town.
Right. This is the moment in the source material where the scope of the crisis truly expands. The creator brings in this devastating data straight from the Illinois State Board of Education for the year 2024. They identified 24 specific schools in the state where exactly 0 students scored proficient in reading on the SAT or the state assessed 0.
I am genuinely struggling to wrap my head around that number.
It's hard to process.
0. Not a concerningly low percentage, not underperforming compared to the national average. Statistically, out of an entire student body across 24 schools, not a single child is reading at a proficient grade level.
0 proficiency.
The source highlights that many of these kids cannot even read at a first grade level. How does a building even function as a school when the most basic baseline of human communication, written text is essentially non-existent for the entire population?
It fundamentally ceases to be an academic environment. It just becomes a custodial environment.
A holding pen.
Exactly, a holding pen until they age out of the system. And there is a common, though highly flawed, assumption that this level of failure is purely a symptom of underfunded inner-city schools dealing with extreme poverty.
That's the usual narrative, right?
But the source immediately shatters that narrative with frontline testimony from a completely different demographic.
Yes, the teacher from Houston. The source brings in testimony from a 7th grade English teacher working in an affluent, well-funded school district in northern Houston. This is not a school lacking resources.
They have all the funding they need.
Right. Yet, this teacher reports that her 7th graders are reading at a 4th grade level. And the specific examples she gives about what her day-to-day classroom looks like are they're bleak.
The specific details are what make her testimony so powerful. She states that her 12 and 13-year-old students are constantly asking her how to spell incredibly basic words like window, important, and though.
We know. The 7th grader asking how to spell window.
Yeah. And she describes an assignment where they read a simple 4-paragraph story. When she asks them to identify the main character, which is, the most basic element of narrative comprehension, they simply can't do it.
But the part of her testimony that truly stopped me in my tracks was when she noted that it took her class 4 entire weeks to learn how to answer a question in a complete sentence.
4 weeks.
Wait, a complete sentence. We're talking subject, verb, predicate. For 7th graders, that completely shifts how I'm thinking about this crisis. It's not just a vocabulary gap. It's a structural gap in how they are forming thought.
You've hit on the exact mechanistic failure happening here. A complete sentence is the foundational building block of logical thought. It requires an understanding of action and cause and effect.
Yeah, how things relate to each other.
Exactly. It is how we organize reality into communicable ideas. If it takes 4 weeks for 12-year-olds to grasp the structural concept of a complete sentence, the educational deficit isn't just about reading words on a page. It indicates a severe delay in cognitive organization.
It's like finding out the foundation of a house isn't just cracked. It was never actually poured to begin with.
That's a great way to put it.
And the really frightening part is that this deficit doesn't magically resolve itself as they get pushed through the system. The source brings up an example from an 11th grade English class, so a junior in high school, a year away from college. The student shared an image of their coursework. The assignment was to circle the confusing word that best completes a basic sentence.
And the confusing words on this 11th grade worksheet were pairs like loose and lose or quite and quiet.
Things you learn in primary school.
Exactly. The student who shared it was mortified, pointing out that this looks like a worksheet designed for a 6-year-old. And the source creator brilliantly points out that another pair on the work, choose and chose, aren't even different vocabulary words.
Right.
They're literally just different tenses of the exact same verb.
When I try to understand how an 11th grader is assigned a worksheet on loose versus lose, an analogy immediately pops into my head. Imagine you decide you want to get stronger, so you go to a gym.
Okay, I'm with you.
You walk up to the bench press, you lie down, you reach up, and the personal trainer hands you a pair of foam dumbbells. You push them up, and there is zero resistance. It's effortless. You ask the trainer, how am I supposed to build any muscle if there's no weight? And the trainer just smiles and says, oh, we don't want you to strain yourself.
That is a terrifying thought.
How can these students possibly build any intellectual muscle if the cognitive resistance provided by their curriculum is literally zero?
That analogy perfectly captures the systemic failure the source is out. The system is intentionally removing the cognitive friction required for growth. The brain, much like a muscle, only adapts and strengthens when it is forced to overcome resistance.
It needs that struggle.
By handing them foam dumbbells, by giving 11th graders worksheets designed for 1st graders, the system ensures they never experience the intellectual strain necessary to develop critical thinking. And the source argues that this lack of friction, this massive lowering of the bar, isn't contained just to academic subjects like literature. It is actively bleeding over into their ability to navigate the physical analog world around them.
Yeah, if they can't handle basic vocabulary, what else do they miss? This leads us into a fascinating section of the source material that dives into the erosion of what we might call analog skills.
Yeah.
The stuff that, until very recently, was just considered the absolute baseline of human functioning in society.
The source begins this exploration of analog erosion by returning to our whistleblower, Vic. He did a follow-up video where he asked his classmates to read a single word written in cursive, and the word was reptile.
The guesses in this video are incredible. One high school student looked at the cursive word reptile and guessed pickle. Another student guessed medium. Another thought it said miniature. The source creator actually gets a bit nostalgic here, talking about growing up in Australia and having to earn a pen license in the 4th grade.
Oh yeah, the pen license.
You literally had to prove your proficiency in cursive handwriting to your teacher before you were allowed to graduate from using a pencil to using a pen in class.
The concept of a pen license is a fascinating artifact of a bygone educational philosophy. It treated handwriting not just as a utilitarian task of getting words on paper, but as a cultivated fine motor.
It meant something.
It did. When you learn cursive, you are forced to engage in continuous spatial reasoning. You have to follow the physical flow of the letter. You have to train your brain to see the word as a unified, connected whole rather than isolated, disjointed symbol. The source implies that the removal of this practice is a symptom of a broader world.
And that physical disconnect becomes glaringly obvious when the source brings up the issue of time blind. We're talking about the fact that many schools have simply removed analog clock from the classroom walls because the student flat out cannot.
The source provides an audio clip of this phenomenon that is profoundly difficult to. A student is looking at an analog clock that clearly shows the time as 9:02.
Just past 9.
Right. So student just starts throwing out random numbers. They guess 7 once, then they guess 12.09, then 9.25. They are completely untethered from the spatial and mathematical time.
I can easily imagine someone listening to this right now thinking, who cares? We all have digital clocks on our phones, our microwaves, our cars. Why do kids in 2026 need to know how to read an analog clock? It's obsolete technology. So how do we unpack why this actually matters?
It matters deeply because of the difference between passive consumption and active reasoning. A digital clock gives you an immediate passive answer. It flashes 9.02. You don't have to do any cognitive work to receive that information.
It's just given to you.
Exactly. An analog clock, however, is essentially a pie chart of the day. It requires spatial reasoning. You have to intuitively understand fractions, what a quarter past the hour looks like physically. You have to understand the mathematical relationship between the hour hand and the minute hand.
You have to contextualize.
Yes, you have to contextualize the current moment within the broader hour. Navigating an analog clock is a cultivated cognitive skill that teaches spatial and temporal. When we remove it in favor of digital convenience, we are again isting them those foam dumbbell. We are removing an opportunity for the brain to practice everyday problems.
That makes total sense. We are trading cognitive exercise for convenience. But if you want to see the ultimate terrifying example of a young brain being completely rewired by a digital visual culture, we have to talk about the Gen Alpha phonics.
Oh, this one is wild.
This was the absolute aha moment for me when reviewing the source material.
It is a profoundly revealing anecdote about the mechanics of modern. The source describes a situation with a 5th grader, a child starting 5th grade in August, meaning he is likely 10 or 11. This child boldly claims to an adult that he doesn't know how to.
And the adult probably thought he was just being funny.
Right. The adult doesn't believe him, assumes he's joking, and offers him $10 to read the giant letters printed on a snack.
And the word on the bag is CHIPS. It's printed in giant, unmissable, bold letters. The adult points to it and tells the kid, just sound it out. So the kid looks at the bag. He meticulously reads the individual letters out loud. CHIPS.
He clearly sees the letters.
He clearly processes the visual input of the letters, and then he proudly announces his guess for what the word says. He guesses potatoes.
Potatoes. It's an incredible cognitive misfire. If we break down the mechanics of what just happened in that child's brain, it is fascinating. He wasn't practicing phonics. He completely bypassed the phonetic decoding process. He didn't link the sound of the letter C and H to the chi sound.
Right. He looked at the physical bag. He recognized the branding and the shape of the vessel. He knew it contained salty, starchy snacks made from potatoes, and he made a purely associative leap.
A total leap.
He linked the physical object to the idea of the object and guessed the word based on the concept. He was essentially reading a logo, not decoding symbolic language. It's associative guessing. It's exactly how a toddler navigates a touchscreen by clicking on brightly colored icons.
Exactly. He is operating purely on visual and contextual cues. The source uses this anecdote to argue that this generation's brains are being fundamentally rewired by digital interfaces that prioritize intuitive visual navigation over the difficult linear process of decoding symbolic text.
And that rewiring has consequences.
Huge consequence. The creator argues that this digital rewiring isn't just affecting how they read bags of chips, it is affecting their physical presence in the world. The source brings up a cultural phenomenon known as the Gen Z stare.
The Gen Z stare. The source claims that these young people seem to lack cultivated social skills, like the ability to maintain normal eye contact, or even the basic biological function of blinking at a normal rate. It sounds almost dystopian when you describe it like that.
It does sound extreme, but the argument the video essay constructs is that when a developing brain spends its most formative years locked onto a glowing, hyperstimulating two-dimensional rectangle, the complex, subtle, nuanced skills required for three-dimensional human interaction simply begin to atrophy.
Because they aren't practicing them.
Right. Making and maintaining appropriate eye contact is a cultive skill. Sustained active listening in a physical space is a cultive. Reading micro-expressions on a human face is a cultive. The source suggests that if you don't practice these physical analog interactions, you lose the capacity for them, resulting in this blank, disconnected stare.
So if we take a step back and look at the cohort of students the source has outlined for us, they are struggling with basic phonics. They can't read cursive. They can't tell time on an analog clock. They have this 1,000-yard digital stare. What happens when these exact kids outgrow the protective bubble of the high school system and enter higher education? Because you can't fake your way through college, right?
You'd think not.
You eventually hit a wall where you actually have to do the work.
Well, according to the source, they are hitting that wall, and it is creating a massive bottom in higher education. The crisis isn't contained. It is crashing like a tidal wave onto college campuses.
The source pulls from a Fortune magazine article to highlight this, and the headline of the article is just brutal. It reads, Gen Z are arriving to college unable to even read a sentence. The article warns that this educational deficit is going to lead to a generation of highly anxious, lonely graduates who are completely unequipped for the workforce.
To illustrate the classroom reality of this, the source quotes a university educator, Professor Jessica Wilson. She admits to a truly staggering reality about her current lecture hall. She says she now has to read texts out loud to her college class.
Out loud? To college?
Yeah. She states that she knows with absolute certainty that if she assigns reading for homework, there is zero chance the students will actually. But the issue goes deeper than lazy. She says that even when the text is physically in front of them in the classroom, they simply cannot process the words on the page.
I am trying to picture this. A college professor standing in front of young adults paying tens of thousands of dollars in tuition, having to read aloud to them like it's kindergarten circle time.
It's a shocking image.
And the source makes it clear that she is not an isolated case. There's an anecdote about a theology professor from Notre Dame. The source creator actually humorously mispronounces it as NRAM in the video, but quickly clarifies she means Notre Dame.
Right.
This professor noted that early in his career, he routinely assigned 25 to 40 pages of dense reading per night, and the students would do it. They might struggle, they might show up to office hours needing help, but they possessed the stamina to engage with the text.
And if you contrast that with today, he says he would be hard-pressed to get a single student to engage with that much text at all. The reading load across universities has plummeted.
So the natural question is, how are these students passing these classes if they aren't reading the material?
Right. How are they getting the grades?
The source highlights the modern crutch, the complete reliance on TikTok summaries and artificial intelligence.
Exactly. If a professor assigns a book, the modern student doesn't crack the spine. They go on TikTok and watch a 60-second summary from an influencer, or they plug the essay prompt into an AI generator and ask for a bullet point synopsis. They use that synthesized, pre-chewed, algorithmic information to write their report.
And then, according to the source, these students have the audacity to complain to the professors when they receive an F for handing in incredibly shallow, inaccurate garbage.
What the source is illustrating here is a cascading institutional failure. Universities are faced with an entire incoming cohort that fundamentally cannot or will not engage with complex written material. To keep enrollment numbers up and avoid failing entire class, the universities are being forced to adapt to the deficit.
They're lowering the standards.
They are tailoring their lectures to accommodate shorter attendance. They are assigning drastically shorter reading lists. They are returning to the same small, easily digests of literature over and over again just to ensure some baseline level.
But if we connect this back to the core purpose of education, I mean, historically, college is supposed to be the crucible that challenges. It's the place that breaks down your preconceived notion, builds you up intellectually by forcing you to grapple with difficult ideas. What happens to the intrinsic value of a university degree when professors are essentially doing story time for 19-year-olds?
The value drops.
The intellectual ceiling isn't just lowering, it feels like it's caving in to meet the floor.
It fundamentally devalues the credential. If higher education transforms into a remedial reading camp, then the complex, abstract, long-term problem-solving skills that society relies on universities to cultivate, in the next generation of leaders, doctors, and engineers, those skills simply won't exist. The societal pipeline of expertise begins to dry up.
Okay, we have thoroughly examined the symptoms. We've seen the viral videos of high schoolers failing basic phonics. We've looked at the terrifying data of zero proficiency schools, and we followed the collapse straight into the college lecture hall. The obvious screaming question we have to explore now is, who broke the system?
How did we get here?
Exactly. And this is where the source material gets highly critical and starts aggressively pointing fingers in multiple directions.
The source engages in a very comprehensive, multifaceted blame game. The creator doesn't just blame one factor. She identifies several intersecting vectors of failure that have created this perfect storm: technology, modern parenting philosophy, educational policy, and even political act.
Let's start with the screen, because technology is the most visible culprit. The source takes a very hardline stance here. It states unequivocally That AI deletes brain power. It frames tablets and iPads as digital pacifiers that are actively rotting developing minds.
The mechanistic argument the creator is making about technology is rooted in cognitive off. The idea is that technology, particularly AI and hyper-curated algorithmic feed, removes the necessity for cognitive struggle.
Which goes back to the foam dumbbells.
Precise. If an artificial intelligence can summarize a 300-page book in 3 seconds, the human brain never has to do the heavy lifting of reading, synthesizing, interpreting, and organizing. The human brain is a remarkably efficient energy. It will not expend energy on a difficult, frustrating task, frictionless shortcut.
It's just human nature.
Over time, the neural pathways required for deep, sustained reading and critical analysis prune away due to lack.
But the technology doesn't just hand itself to a toddler. A 0-year-old doesn't buy an iPad, which brings the source to its most aggressive and probably controversial target, the parent, specifically millennial parents.
Right.
The source notes the demographic reality that 73% of Gen Alpha parents are millennial, and it places the brunt of the blame for this literacy crisis squarely on their shoulders.
The creator makes a very strong, pointed argument that this specific generation of parents is failing at a foundational level. The source claims that parents are handing 0-year-old babies iPads to quiet so the parents can watch reality TV or scroll their own phones.
The source claims these parents are completely failing to do the absolute basics, like reading to their kids at home. But the video essay goes much deeper than just screen time. It attacks the underlying behavioral philosophy of modern parenting. Now, I want to be clear here for everyone listening. We are just imparting what the source argues, not endorsing it.
Absolutely.
But the creator heavily criticizes what she calls woke, gentle parenting and the culture of the participation trophy.
If you follow the source's logic here, the creator's perspective is that this modern, hyper-accommodating parenting style fundamentally lacks the necessary boundaries, structure, and discipline required to raise a student. In fact, the source explicitly claims that authoritarian parenting only—
Wow, that's a strong statement.
It is. The argument is that if a child is never taught to tolerate boredom, if they are never forced to sit still and endure a task they don't want to do, like sounding out difficult words, they will never develop the attention span required for academic success. They will simply quit the moment learning.
To contrast this modern failure, the source shares a personal anecdote about a friend of hers who has 2 kids in the 1st grade. This friend did something that is apparently viewed as revolutionary today. She read physical books to her kids every single night since they were in—
What a con—
Right. She didn't use tablets, she used print. And when these kids got to school, the teachers were absolutely shocked by their reading ability. They were treating these kids like prodigies.
Just for knowing how to read.
Yeah. The friend eventually found out that most of the other parents in the class openly admitted they just don't read with their kids at all.
That anecdote perfectly illustrates the source's central point about neuroplasticity and exposure. A child's brain will wire itself to match its primary environment. If a child's primary exposure to language is the hyperkinetic, fragmented, flashing audio of a TikTok, their brain will adapt to process fast, shallow—
It wires.
Exact. If their primary exposure is slow, deliberate, linear book parent, their brain adapts to sustain focus and build complex structure.
But the source doesn't let the educational system off the hook either. It takes a massive swing at educational policy, specifically tracing the institutional rot back to the No Child Left Behind Act.
The argument presented in the video essay is that systemic mandates like No Child Left Behind, which were ostensibly designed to ensure no student falls below a certain academic threshold, have inadvertently created a system that actively punishes out
by dragging everyone to the middle.
Right. The source points out that to meet these baseline metrics, schools are constantly forced to redirect away from height. The creator highlights the elimination of gifted programs in various school districts across the country.
Right. The claim is that schools are intentionally killing off gifted and talented programs because separating the high achievers from the struggling students is increasingly viewed as discriminatory.
Which is a huge debate right now.
It is. And the source uses a really evocative metaphor here to describe the modern classroom. It calls it a boat of mediocrity, where if anyone falls in, they can't swim.
The bureaucratic incentive structure has shifted from promoting excellence to enforcing a baseline. And when you enforce equity by lowering the ceiling rather than raising the floor, you get stagnation.
It makes me think of a naval convoy. If you have a convoy of ships moving across the ocean, the entire fleet can only travel as fast as the absolute slowest ship in the group. If you apply that to a classroom environment and you refuse to let the fast learners pull ahead into gifted programs, what happens?
They get stuck.
The kids who are built for speed, the kids who are eager and ready to learn complex concepts, just have to idle their engine. They sit there waiting for the slowest ship to catch up. They get bored, they tune out, they stop trying, and eventually they lose the capacity to go fast at all. The entire fleet just drift.
And while this academic stagnation is happening, the source argues that the physical environment of the classroom is descending into behavioral chaos. The creator highlights the immense plight of modern teachers.
It's got to be so hard for them.
Oh, absolutely. These educators aren't just trying to teach phonics to kids who are glued to iPads. They're having to act as behavioral wardens, corralling 20 kids with massive unaddressed behavioral and emotional issues every single day. The environment is simply not conducive to learning.
And the source gets overtly political here as well, pointing the finger at teachers and students who prioritize political activism over actual academic. Again, just remaining neutral reporters of the source here, but the video essay explicitly calls out what it refers to as May Day walkouts and political protests organized by schools.
Right, she is very specific.
She specifically targets blue states and cities like Madison, Chicago, and certain districts in North Carolina, arguing that schools are spending time organizing protests instead of teaching spelling.
The source quotes a highly frustrated Wisconsin mother who is responding to these student protests. Her quote is sharp. She said, "I don't want your opinion on politics when you can't even spell politics."
Ouch. That is a devastating critique of where the system's priorities lie.
It really is. The creator's overarching synthesis of this blame game is that we are looking at a perfect catastrophic storm. You have distracted, technology-reliant parents practicing undisciplined parenting who are sending their unread-to, screen-addicted children into a rigid, low-bar educational system that is more concerned with enforcing equity and facilitating political activism than with basic academic rigor.
And the result of that collision is a generation that literally cannot read. Okay, we have thoroughly established the what and the why, according to the source material. We've gone through the blame game. Now we have to look at the so what. What happens next? The source takes us on a fast-forward extrapolation into the future, and it is not a pretty picture. The creator repeatedly compares the trajectory of modern America to the movie Idiocracy,
which is a very specific, potent type of cultural shorthand. The source creators state quite seriously that she views the film Idiocracy not as the satirical sci-fi comedy it was intended to be in 2006, but as a literal documentary of our current time.
It's the idea that we are actively breeding and educating our way into a society where, in a few decades, there will just be one person left who can read a book, and everyone else will look at them like they're a wizard performing dark magic.
It sounds like a joke, but she is dead serious.
But to ground this sci-fi nightmare in present observable reality, the source zeroes in on linguistic collapse. Specifically, she points to the explosion in the use of filler words.
This is perhaps one of the most crucial observations in the entire video. The source notes that people today use the word like excessively. Now, filler words, they have always existed in spoken language.
Sure, we use them all the time.
We do. But the creator argues this current phenomenon is fundamentally different. It's not just a nervous verbal etiquette. It's a symptom of a profound underlying lack of vocabulary.
The argument is that instead of pausing, gathering their thoughts, and searching their mental database for the precise, complex word they need to express an abstract idea, they just hit a wall.
The word isn't there.
Right. The database is empty. The vocabulary simply isn't there. So instead of finding the right word, they plug the gaping hole in their sentence with the word like.
And this touches on a profound psychological and philosophical concept known as linguistic determinism.
Explain that for us.
This is the theory that the language you possess fundamentally dictates the boundary. The words you know create the architecture of reality. If you lack a complex vocabulary, you literally lack the cognitive scaffolding, process, express complex nuance. You cannot think about a subject you not have acquired.
I really want to spend a second. It's terrifying. If a student doesn't know the word exemplify, they don't just lose a word for a spelling test. They lose the concept of one thing perfectly representing another. They lose the ability to categorize the world in that specific way.
Exactly. When vocabulary shrinks, the resolution of human thought, we lose nuance. Everything becomes black or white, good or bad. We lack the words to describe the gray area. The source is arguing that the loss of language, literal mechanical loss of critical thinking, a society that cannot articulate complex thought, a society that cannot solve.
To highlight how far we've fallen in terms of valuing intellect, the source draws a brutal cultural juxtaposition. The creator looks at the mirror of our culture, reality television. On one hand, you have American reality TV, which she describes as half-naked people sitting on beaches, essentially just engaging in vapid manufactured drama.
It celebrates superficiality.
Right.
And she aggressively contrasts that with a Korean reality show currently available on Netflix called The Devil's Plan.
Oh, I've actually seen clips. In this Korean show, the entire premise is finding the smartest person in a room full of super nerds, doctors, lawyers, professional gamers, and when they fail a challenge, the show literally locks them in a simulated prison and forces them to solve complex math equations and spell difficult words just to escape. The show celebrates high-level intellect logic, and intense problem-solving.
It's a stark juxtaposition of cultural value. One culture's entertainment elevates the intellect and rewards cognitive struggle, and the other culture's entertainment elevates pure, lowest common denominator spectacle and emotional.
I found it incredibly ironic when the source creator brought up Scandinavia to hammer this point home. She mentions how Scandinavian kids are seemingly, pooped out, speaking multiple languages from a young age, casually switching between Swedish and English, while American high school teenagers are staring at a white index card, stumbling over a standard English word like silhouette, and calling it Sylvia.
It perfectly encapsulates the global education we're worrying about.
So we have painted a rather grim, comprehensive picture here. A society losing its words, losing its attention span, losing its academic rigor, and losing its ability to navigate physical reality. But the source does not leave us entirely without hope.
Thankfully.
The final segment of the video essay shifts from this doom and gloom systemic diagnosis to actionable individual prescription.
The source's central thesis on recovery is surprisingly simple, but it is brutally difficult. It basically boils down to this: stop doom scroll, put the phone.
Easier said than done.
Oh, absolutely. The creator explicitly acknowledges the physiological addiction at play. Tech delivers fast, frictionless dope. Books Books demand that you actively participate in the creation of the narrative in your own mind. You have to visualize the characters and build the world.
It's active, not passive.
Right. The source warns that if you want to guarantee your brain doesn't turn into literal soup in the next 10 years, you have to engage in the physical act of reading printed books and manually writing things down. You have to rebuild the neural path.
It's a call for intense personal responsibility. The source says that parents absolutely must read to their children from infancy to normalize language exposure and build those attention spans early. But for adults whose attention spans are already fried, which, let's be honest, is most of, the creator offers some empathy alongside the tough love. She admits that even she has to fight the intense urge to doom scroll.
The key takeaway here is deeply up. Attention span is not permanently broken. It is simply atrophy. It is exactly like a muscle that hasn't in.
So you can get it back.
You can, but the solution requires forcing yourself through the initial painful discomfort of sitting in silence with an analog. You have to endure the boredom and the twitchy desire to check your phone until your brain remembers how Dane focused.
And to help with that transition, the source actually provides specific books designed to hook you, keep you turning the pages, and rebuild that cognitive stamina.
She highly recommends Ken Follett's Pillars of the Earth, praising it for fans of sweeping historical. She also suggests a psychological thriller called The Silent Patient, noting she couldn't put it down and devoured it in a...
And her absolute favorite recommendation is a book called The Bronze Horse. She describes it as a phenomenal World War II love. She specifically points out that while it has adult themes, it isn't written like the, quote, creepy modern smut that dominates a lot of current algorithmic popular fiction.
Right, it's actual writing.
It's an actual narrative-driven story with complex sense.
It is a passionate call for an analog, but it does raise a practical challenge for anyone's device.
Right. Think about your own life right now. My question is, how do you practically implement this analog deed without feeling completely isolated? Our jobs, our social lives, our bank accounts, our news, they are all inexorably tied to these glowing rectangles.
They're unavoidable.
So how do you disconnect enough to save your brain without disconnecting from the reality of the modern world?
It requires intentional, aggressive compartmentalization. It's not about throwing your smartphone in the ocean and moving to a cabin in the woods, It's about reclaiming the sanctity of your downtime. It's about consciously choosing the friction of a physical book over the frictionless, numbing slide of an algorithm when you finally have a moment to yourself.
Well, we have covered a massive, heavy amount of ground. We started in that high school hallway, looking over the shoulder of a teenager unable to read a single sentence on an index card.
We waded through the depressing macro-level data of schools with zero.
And we followed those struggling students straight into the college lecture halls where professors are forced to read aloud. We explored the source's highly charged blame, analyzing the arguments against tech addiction, modern parenting philosophies, and flawed educational policies that enforce mediocrity.
And we looked at the existential threat of a society losing its language, and by extension, its ability to think critically.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought that builds on everything we've discussed, but wasn't explicitly answered by the source material. We've spent a lot of time talking about linguistic determinism, how vocabulary shapes the very limits of our reality and our problem-solving capabilities.
Right.
If that collective vocabulary is actively shrinking, if it is being whittled down day by day to accommodate AI summaries 15-second videos, and the filler word like, what happens to our collective imagination?
That is the real existential fear at the bottom.
It is. The question you have to ask yourself is, are we just losing our ability to read a sentence on an index card? Or are we fundamentally losing our ability to dream up complex, nuanced solutions for the future?
If we don't have the words to describe a better world, how can we possibly build it?
That is a heavy, entirely necessary question to carry with you as you log off today. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Go pick up a physical book, force yourself through those first few uncomfortable pages, rebuild that attention span, and we will warmly welcome you back for the next.